Hello all and welcome. I'm Colette from Witchways and I'm here today to talk to you about house protection, why witches, intuitives, and empaths need a little bit more of that, and to offer you 4 spells that you can use. Everyone wants to feel secure in their house, but witches need an extra layer of protection because it's often the place where we do our magic. And the more skilled you are, the more personal power you collect, the more visible you are in the spirit world. And mostly that's a good thing. But occasionally there are malevolent spirits or beings that are not well intentioned. And just like in the human world, you want to lock your doors and secure your windows. And as witches and intuitives, we want to have a filter to make sure the spirits we are working with have our best intention at heart. If we're strongly empathic, we probably also need an extra filter just to kind of block out the psychic noise from the rest of the world so that our homes can be sanctuaries and peaceful places where we go to rest. Protecting the house begins with assessing what are the vulnerable entry places into our home. In witchcraft, these are often called liminal spaces, and these are places that are in between. They are neither one thing or another, like doors and windows. And just like in the human world, these are entry points where malevolent spirits and negative energy can enter into your home. So this is places where a lot of our charms and spells for protections are placed, near those entry points. This can include things like washes of various herbs, which is particularly prevalent in hoodoo and southern conjure traditions, as well as some various European traditions. You can also lay lines of herbs and salt. You can hang bundles of herbs or charms in these areas. You can also hang crosses of protective sticks tied with red ribbon as extra protection. Or we might call on a protective local spirit and stay on good terms with it through giving frequent offerings. We might also consider developing a friendly relationship with house spirits in our home. And I have a whole video on house spirits that I'll share in the description, and I also have another video on how to keep our homes energetically clear so that energy doesn't accumulate and attract negative energy towards you. These are actually 2 of my favorite videos that I've ever made, and so I will link them in the descriptions. The first spell is very simple and comes from Mediterranean folklore. Just take some olive oil and breathe the wish of protection into it, and then dot it around your doors and windows on the outside. If you want to make it a little more complex and give it a boost, you can take that olive oil before you apply it, soak some dried rosemary leaves in it for about 2 weeks in a warm, dark spot, strain it out, and then use it. Rosemary will add a bit more protection. You can also use holy water if you work with Catholic magical traditions, or create rosemary tea as a water-based substance to use instead. Water is a little bit better if you need to use it indoors because you live in an apartment, because it doesn't necessarily stain curtains or paint. The next spell is based on Germanic traditions, and you'll need 16 short hazel twigs and 16 iron nails. If you don't have access to hazel twigs, you can switch to a different protective wood of some kind, whatever feels comfortable to you. Almost all trees are protective. Sticks in general are protected. You can draw a quick circle around yourself if you're in a situation where you need a little more protection. Hazel, however, does have an affinity for the darker side of magic and promotes intuition. These days you might have to buy steel nails, which often have a good percentage of iron in them because it's harder to find pure iron nails. You can find them online at special forge stores or sometimes on Etsy on witchy sites. Check at your local hardware store though first, because sometimes they keep them for flooring and they'll certainly be cheaper there. clear the nails, and wash the sticks. Then charge them with the intention of protection by whispering to them your intention as you hold them in your hands. I do have a whole video on charging if you want info on that, and I'll link that in the description. I like to tie the nails and the twigs together with twine and add 4 knots to add stability and protection. Traditionally in Europe, they would have been buried in earthenware or ceramic bowls. If you live in an apartment, you can place them in a charm bag or a piece of red cloth and tie them with 4 knots and place them somewhere discreet. This spell should last several years. This spell comes from Basque tradition and several other European countries. I've also heard that it's been used in Hoodoo and in China, and this piece of protection is based on the idea of trying to confuse or keep malevolent spirits occupied so that they don't enter your space. Fill a clean jar with sand, grain, or small pebbles and place it near the door. Vampires, witches with evil intent, and malevolent spirits can't enter. The idea is that they will stop to count the objects. In European tradition, millet or poppy seeds are favored, and in China, rice. But through time, of course, clever magical practitioners have adapted this spell to use what they had on hand. This spell is also related to Britannic and Celtic and Appalachian folklore traditions about the idea of placing sieves over doorknobs when you're sleeping to protect you. Because again, the spirit has to stop and count the holes. In Slavic tradition, it seems that vampires are compelled to stop and count the holes where fishing nets are hung. I like to use a version where I place dark colored stones in the bottom half of the jar. I like basalt because that is everywhere where I live. And as you place them, you can speak the names of any ancestors that you have good connections to and ask them to provide protection and blessings to you and your house. You can also ask anyone who's passed over if you don't have good relationships with your family, because family relationships can be complex. And in the top half of the jar, then place light colored pebbles or small rocks and call on the power of the stars, who are our oldest ancestors, to provide you with protections and blessings for your household. Then hold the jar between your 2 hands and speak aloud a wish that the rocks and spirits you've called provide you with protection and keep harmful spirits, beings, and magic out of your home. I feel rocks hold magic for a really long time, but a lot of people do feel that you should recharge or renew your spells once every 6 months or a year. Use your intuition. Over time, you'll know when protection starts to wane. Many protective practices are really old, or at least date to early Christian times, but we can't always prove it. However, for the next spell I'm going to share, we do have documentation because they were written by 2 men about 2,000 years ago. Diogenes from Greece and Ovid from Rome wrote about attaching hawthorn branches to doorways as a way of protecting the household. Pliny the Elder, writing in roughly the same era, preferred bay leaves, bay branches, or having a bay tree in your yard to protect the house and the general surrounding area. I use versions of this idea a lot. I've shared some of them, and a lot of other witches do as well. Today I want to share a new one. Find a stick or a branch that calls to you or is from a tree that you feel is friendly and accessible to you. I like oak, elder, hawthorn, and walnut myself. If you know the tree that it came from, take a moment to give it an offering of your breath or a little bit of water and some appreciation. The branch or stick that you use should be about the width of your doorway. If you're doing it on the inside of your doorway in your house, it should be a little bit narrower so you can attach it to the top of the door without it blocking the doorway when you try to open the door. Wash the stick and speak aloud a wish for the tree spirit to protect you and your house. I like to strip the bark off with a knife, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Then use paint or a Sharpie to write a spiral from the base of the stick all the way to the tip of it. Once that paint or Sharpie ink dries, you can cover it up with yarn. If you don't like the way it looks, you can also use natural twine, or if you want to be more discreet about the magic that you're doing, then hang it over your doorway, repeating a wish for it to be protective of your home. If you want it to look more decorative, you can add bunches of dried flowers. You can use anything that dries well, since it's just cosmetic, like straw flowers or statice. And if you want the flowers to actually carry some more protection and add to the spell, I would suggest red roses. And I just want to say that I love doing a magical, longer process, but sometimes if I'm busy, if a stick presents itself, I'll just pick it up, charge it with my breath, place it above my doorway, and hold it in place with a couple of thumbtacks below and above, and call it good. I'm curious how many of you use protection magic and want to hear more about it. I'm planning out my summer videos, so it'd be really helpful if you just put a simple yes or no if you want to hear more about protection magic, and just put that in the comments. I still have a spring release and renewal spell on my Patreon site that is free and available to the public to download. I'll put a link for that in my description. And thank you all for feeding those algorithm gods. I really appreciate everyone that likes every time and comments. It's so helpful. Until next time, stay safe and be well.